Hey guys, tonight I want to talk to you about a couple of the aspects of miniatures gaming that you have to deal with in almost any game in almost any scale, and that is measuring range and checking for line of sight. Now, measuring range in most games is done with a tape measure generally. Normally you'll just lay it down and check the range between the two vehicles, and that's how it's done. There's other ways people do it. I've actually created for myself a couple of measuring sticks here that I have marked off in meters, because this works with the game scale that I use. So I can actually lay this down and I can actually read it in meters, which the way all my rules are written, all measurements are in meters. But these are not real great to use because, as you can see, even in this case, it's not quite long enough to reach the next vehicle, so I'd need two of them. And if I made it much longer, it would be very fragile and I'd probably end up breaking it. So these don't really work out all that well. I thought it was a really good idea, but it wasn't. Another way people do it is sometimes you'll take a piece of ribbon or some kind of cloth and actually write on it either inches or meters, as I've done here. So this works out okay. I can stretch this out and see that that's 1100 meters. And then there's also like cloth tape measures like you can find in a fabric store. So those are kind of the main ways that people do measurements on a game table. So the other thing you have to worry about when you're playing a miniatures game is establishing actual line of sight. Like, I need to know, can the person in this T-80 tank see this M1 Abrams, or can it see any of these other vehicles here? There's a couple of different ways to establish line of sight. I happen to actually have a Periscope that I use sometimes. I can actually set this down behind one of the vehicles, look in the top part here. I'm not sure if you can actually see this. There, we'll move it here. I can look in the top here, and then I'm looking out the bottom, and then I can actually see across the battlefield and see if I have line of sight. This works okay, but the further you get away and the smaller the miniatures are, the more difficult it becomes to actually see if you have line of sight or not. And then sometimes you'll have somebody on the other side will have to put something behind the tank as a marker so you can more easily see it, or point at it or something like that. So that's not terribly easy. Another thing people do is they'll just take a piece of string or thread and stretch it between the two vehicles, and that'll tell you if you have line of sight. That works okay too. When you start getting into a slightly more high-tech solution, some people love to use a little laser pointer. That's really cool because you can actually put it right behind the tank and point it over here, and it's hitting that M1 over there right now, so I know I have line of sight. If I move a little to the left, it hits this building right here while I'm trying to catch that Bradley behind. I know that I can't see that Bradley because the red dot doesn't touch the Bradley. I can move it a little to the right here, and there's another Bradley back there kind of behind and to my right of the M1, and I can see that one. So this actually works pretty cool. It tells me if I actually have line of sight or not. Just by knowing if there's a red dot on the target, then I know there's a straight line of sight. So there's a couple different methods for measuring distance and a couple different methods for measuring for determining line of sight. Now, what if you could do all that at the same time in one easy step? This is where the coolest miniature wargaming accessory in the world comes in. This right here is a laser rangefinder or distance measuring equipment made by Bosch. I picked this up at Home Depot just a couple of days ago. It is not cheap. It's about $100, so probably a lot of people are going to say, that's just crazy, I'm not going to buy one of those. But if you are a crazy gadget freak like me and a crazy war gamer, you might just want to pick one of these up because they're really pretty cool. How this works is you just turn it on, and there's different measurements scales on here. This is inches, This is meters. This is feet. And this is feet in inches. So I just use inches. And there's two ways that this measures. It either measures from the front surface or from the back surface, and that's shown by this little icon up here. I just select it to the front surface because that's the way I like to measure. And then all you have to do is take this, set it behind the spotting tank, press the arrow button, and that turns on the laser beam. Now you can use this just as I did the other laser to determine line of sight. Like right now it's hitting this M1 here, so I know that I have good line of sight. Once I determine that I have good line of sight, I just hit the arrow button one more time. Let me make sure I'm on it. Press that arrow button one more time, and it gives me a reading here, 22 3/8 inches. I like to just round up or down to the nearest inch, so I'm going to call that 22 inches. Now we'll just check that with a tape measure and see that from turret center to turret center is exactly 22 inches. This thing here claims to be accurate within 1/16 of an inch at distances up to, I think, a couple of 100 feet. It's amazing. And I've checked this over and over and over, and their claim to be accurate to a 1/16 of an inch is a valid claim. It's definitely very, very close, and definitely close enough for wargaming if you're going to round off to the nearest inch. So, as I said before, you just turn it on. It's on 0. Turn on the laser beam. Check your line of sight. This time we're going to go over to this Abrams over here. I can see that I have line of sight. Press the arrow button again, and I get a reading of 20 3/4 inches. So I'm going to round that up to 21 and check. And from turret center to turret center gets me about 20 and a half. So 21 is perfect. That's just fine. So it's a pretty amazing little piece of equipment. It's like I said, it's a little expensive. It's not a $10 tape measure. It's a $100 piece of equipment. So I think that's the coolest thing ever for wargaming, even though it's not made for wargaming. It'd just be nice. In a small situation like I'm showing you here, just a little tape measure would probably work just fine. But imagine if you were playing 15 or 20 millimeter miniatures, or even if you're playing 6 millimeter on a huge playing surface, and you had ranges of 60 to 80 inches, and you don't want to be stretching a tape measure across all your terrain and bumping into other things. You can just use the laser beam. Nothing gets touched, and you can measure any range you want, and very, very accurately. So I highly recommend this if you're a technology nut like me and you want to just buy something really cool to make your wargaming even more fun and more gadgety. So that's what I wanted to show you guys today, and I hope you enjoyed this short little video and enjoyed this gadget. This is the Bosch Professional GLM40. That's the model number, and I picked this up at Home Depot. A quick search online let me know that I think the GLM40 might be an older model, and it might be being replaced by the GLM50. I don't know the difference between the two, but they seem to be the same price. So if you find a 40 or a 50, like I said, I don't know what the difference is, but this one works just fine. Newer model probably works even better. So there you go. Have fun with that. Thank you very much.